Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brody Consulting Group. To get more information about our publishing and coaching services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brody, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Karen Walsh, who is currently writing her first book. Karen, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me on, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here and totally weird.
Is this your first podcast?
My second. The first one was when I was at that in London last year on an educational tech podcast. So I'm still not quite used to it.
It'll be fine. With this show, it's just a fun conversation.
I'm a good converser.
Excellent.
Conversationalist.
Excellent. Are you ready to get started with our questions?
I am indeed.
All right, here we go. Question number 1. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Well, that's a good question. I am writing my first book or books. I'm in the process of 2 of them at the moment. But I've also already published articles and other ones. One is At Home in the Whedonverse, Essays on Domestic Place, Space, and Life, which came out in, I think it was 2017, but you can find it on Amazon for both Kindle and paperback. And I'm going to be published at some point in the near future, since the other edits are done, in a Transmediating the Whedonverse. I am a Whedon scholar of Joss Whedon, particularly with a focus on my good girl Buffy. But I think what I would say is probably right in line with everything I've been writing so far. Follow your passion. The flip side of that is I feel you also have to be practical. Last year, John Scalzi, the sci-fi author, published a book called Don't Live for Your Obituary. And he gave some of the best advice I've ever heard. You know, all writing is writing. And he spoke about how even if, marketing writing is, and I quote, dead boring, it pays the bills, which is just as important as being, your favorite version of your favorite author. I love writing about cybersecurity, which I do for several clients. I have a content marketing business, but it's interesting and it pays the bills. But I also love writing my nonfiction books, and I can't do one without the other. So if I had to give somebody advice, it would be, it's okay not to be writing your novel or your nonfiction work all the time. And it's just as important to have your bills paid, and there's no shame in that. You're still a writer, which still feels weird to me saying about myself. So there's that.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
I definitely feel it's finding people who buy into your ideas. I think it sounds lame in some respects, but it's really true. I write a lot of academically focused nonfiction, and that's not a huge market, believe it or not. Not too many people want to read, academic-based nonfiction, but I think if you have the right focus and you find the right niche, you find the right people. It just takes time. It's the same for marketing content. You need to find the niche. What are you good at? And find the people who appreciate it. I'm working on a book that, don't tell my editors, really, really way behind deadline, on Hamilton, More Than a Moment is what I'm calling it, that talks about Hamilton the musical and cultural studies. Not everybody wants to read about Gramsci, and they don't even know who he is, so you have to find the right people. I had the idea while I was teaching, but then I spent a year finding someone who was interested in it and finding sort of the right approach to it. My Geek Heroines book that's going to come out in 2019, I think it's set for July, came from proposing the Hamilton book to probably about 5 or 6 academic publishing companies, and I proposed to ABC Clio, and the Hamilton book didn't fit their repertoire, but they liked my ideas, they liked my thought process, and they suggested I come up with something else. So right now I'm working on what I hope is an empowering book for a lot of geeky females out there who are, our role models in fiction and in real life. Everyone from She-Ra to Wonder Woman to Buffy the Vampire Slayer to Gail Simone and some other really great geeky women.
Well, one thing in there that you really grabbed my attention with, and that's my all-time favorite musical, Hamilton. So tell us a bit more about that, because you grabbed my attention big time on that one.
I'm really excited about this one. I used to teach at the University of Hartford. I actually left in May to write full-time content marketing in my books. And while I was teaching, I did a unit on Hamilton the musical and sort of doing a cultural analysis of it, and realized that the women may not really be portrayed in the best possible light, considering they're kind of brought down to a trope. So I started looking at it, and it turns out that a lot of the main ideas that I've come up with is the idea that Hamilton sits in a particular cultural space, both technology-wise, in using social media, and in its space within kind of musical theater. And by doing that flip, the racial flip that makes it so popular, and incorporating a lot of hip-hop elements into it, it came at the perfect time to sort of create fandom as what they call a collective identity, where people can buy into things that they choose to buy into, that allows it to create sort of an overarching message that whether you're on the right side of the aisle or the left side of the aisle, you can still buy into a lot of the progressive messages in it, because it does rely on our well-known history. So within that space, I've got about 9 chapters that I'm going to work on. Why it's important, how the music also kind of bridges that cultural divide, as well as some things where there's a little bit of commentary about, well, maybe this wasn't done right. Maybe there are better ways we could do it. And completing the book is going to be some sections on the transmedia elements, where you take it out of its original form and show what they've done since. How did they use social media to create movements? How did Ham for Ham give the musical more lift? How did it bring more people into it? How are they now using things like, there was a Drunk History about 6 or 8 months ago, where they did a gender swap of the characters, which opens a whole new discussion into the diversity aspect of our founding. So that's kind of where that one's going. I've got it all lined up in my head. I just need to now get it on the page.
So how far have you gotten with the Hamilton book?
That's a good question. I have, like I said, a lot of it outlined in my head. I have a lot of the introductory research that I think was the hardest part. In terms of reading for the Hamilton book, I really had to go and take a deep dive into cultural studies that included Antonio Gramsci, who was sort of the founder of cultural studies in the 1920s, take a look at how to translate that into the modern day. So I have some of it written, not as much as I would like, but I have most of the primary theories outlined. So I think once I can finally dive into that, it'll go fast. It's not as long as the Geek Heroines book, so if I can bounce out half the Geek Heroines book in about a month, I should be able to bang out the Hamilton book in about a month or two once I finally get to sit down and do it. But like I said, being practical, my content marketing pays my bills, and when I have a client who says I have a last-minute deadline and they're paying me a really good rate per hour, and the publishing doesn't, because it's an academic press, then the one that pays the bills has to kind of come first a little bit.
So both these books that you're doing those for the academic press, is that correct?
ABC Claro is a library press, so that one does come with a little bit of an advance. So that one's kind of fun in its own right. It'll be in libraries, so all sorts of kids can read it. It's not, which makes it more expensive, and most people probably won't want to spend, I think it's going to retail for $75. Won't want to spend $75 on a female geek heroine's book, but I think it's got a little bit more reach in some respects because it will be in libraries. So it kind of depends. An academic press like Lexington is not going to pay you up front. They only pay you, you don't have to pay anything, so it's totally different from some self-publishing houses, but you only make a percentage after you sell a certain amount. So I think it's a decent percentage. I think that one's 8% once I sell a certain number of copies. And I'm not really worried that once it's out there, it won't sell. I think it'll do really well. There's not a lot of Hamilton stuff on the market. The flip side is ABC Clio pays me up front and gives me hard deadlines, whereas Lexington just says, go ahead, do your writing, and we have a deadline, but talk to us when it's done. So it's two different types of presses, which is also pretty interesting.
Well, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you plan on using with your book launch that you feel is going to work well.
So I'm already using it a little bit. Especially with the Geek Heroines book, it's certainly more in the front of my mind at the moment since that one's definitely coming out. And I have a cover all set for her, and it's beautiful, and I'm excited. So I spend a lot of time on Twitter hashtagging my workday and my insights. For instance, today I was writing my Geek Heroine stuff, and I'm writing about She-Ra, and I'm tagging the new She-Ra cartoon writer, Noelle Stevenson. I'm going to interview her at NYCC, and I definitely want to bring, some of that in because it also brings additional excitement to the piece itself because it's not just research. It's actually, wow, you interviewed this person. Yesterday I was writing about the comics author Gail Simone and the geek girl extraordinaire Felicia Day, and I tagged them. In my cybersecurity work, because that's also a large part of my writing. I put my InfoSec thoughts out there and use hashtags that go around the community. So I think a lot of it boils down to good social marketing involves doing your research, knowing where your audience is, knowing what they're looking at, knowing what hashtags they use, and be funny. I think I had more responses than a normal person would think when I compared InfoSec Research Institute Pokemon to Pokemon. We are big Pokemon Go nerds in my house, and clearly, my InfoSec people are geeks just like me, and I'm a geek, and it fit the audience and resounded with a lot of people, and it was amusing. And I use a lot of GIFs or GIFs, however people want to pronounce it these days. There's a big argument about it. A lot of them, and people like that. It catches their attention when they're scrolling through. So a lot of it is about just, I think the best thing I can say is if you are going to be doing your own marketing, take a look at social marketing strategies, read up on content marketing. It's driven a lot of what I do with my own book and publishing stuff outside of the information security world. It's a lot of knowing where people are, target your audience. Don't write for your audience. Let me take that back. Don't write what you want to tell your audience. Write what your audience is looking for. That was the biggest difference between traditional writing and content marketing that I came up with, is that when I'm writing, my book, I'm telling people something. I have an idea, and I am sharing my idea with them, and that is so much fun and so empowering. On the other hand, when you're doing marketing, you have to think about what your audience is looking for, because they don't want you to tell them something, they want to find something. So you kind of have to strike that balance when you're doing a marketing strategy between, this is what I want you to know, read my book, and people are going to be out there on the internet looking for something that they're interested in, and make sure you're targeting it that way, if that makes sense.
It does, and I'd like to ask you about the power of hashtags. So could you share with our audience a little bit about good hashtag strategies and really how to utilize that?
A lot of it kind of came up organically in that I spend a lot of time as I keep saying, a content marketing person. I spend a lot of time researching for my clients, what's a good hashtag here, what's a good hashtag there. So, with Hamilton, a lot of it is always going to be tagging, Hamilton the musical, this, that, and the other thing. But for the geek world, a lot of it is going to be, people are going to follow a hashtag that they're interested in. So it's going to be, hashtag Marvel, hashtag Geek Chic. There's a lot of great tools out there. I think one of the ones I used to use, and I'm looking it up while I talk to you, was Right Tag. You can put in a tag you think is going to work, and it'll tell you how many people are using it. There's hashtagify.me, and that's another good one that I've used to try and figure out where people are. It'll give you the statistics about who's hashtagging what, how often is something getting read through a hashtag.
Could you repeat that one again, please? What was it called?
Oh, sure. Hashtagify.me. It's really cool. It's got nifty little graphics, and when you put something in, it will tell you, so you can type a hashtag like Marvel, and I'm doing it as we speak, and it's giving me the results that tell me exactly how many things there are. It'll let you, if you buy it, it will let you get some insights to plan ahead so you can monitor the performance. So on Twitter, if I'm doing Marvel, it's not letting me do it right now, so that's a fail. But that's a pretty cool one. I like that one a lot.
And you also mentioned...
although now they're not...
I was just going to ask...
that one's not free anymore. Oh, no. It was free like 2 months ago. So it was clearly a good one.
I was going to ask you one other thing. So you mentioned about tagging other people and companies. So you mentioned you actually tagged Hamilton the Musical. So how does that work?
Not so well. They're really busy, so I think I've definitely found that it's easier in my geek community to get noticed, especially since I also write for a geek blog, geekmomblog.com, and so we sort of know people in that industry, so it's also about getting yourself known in a particular industry. I don't think Lin-Manuel Miranda is going to recognize random Karen, Geek Mom K on Twitter, but a lot of people will recognize me when I go into, not recognize me, but if I talk in fan forums, that's also a really great one. I know that I was looking for some people to interview in some fan forums for Hamilton, and I got the two moderators saying, oh my goodness, that's such an important work. I'm really excited about it. Let us know when it comes out. So it's really about, seeking out the communities within your niche. And I think it all goes back to, again, finding a niche. If you are a science fiction writer, go find your science fiction people. If you're a romance writer, find that community and become involved. If you're a cybersecurity writer of any sort, go find those people. It's easy to find the online communities once you start looking for them, and a lot of them are really welcoming. So that's really where you want to focus.
Where do you typically find these communities? Are you talking about like Reddit or Facebook? What are you talking about exactly in regards to finding these different communities?
I never use Reddit. Reddit is particularly for women kind of toxic sometimes, so I generally try to stay away from it. If you're a woman, I definitely think there's a lot of great women out there on Twitter who are particularly supportive, especially if you're in sort of a male-dominated niche. Comics and nerdiness is very much a male-dominated niche still. So when I'm out there, it's really great to find other women, share with other women. Women are particularly pro-social, so they are going to share something that promotes women's identities, which again is why the 100 Geek Heroines is something that ABC Cleo was really excited about. I think if you're on Facebook, you can find groups. There are some good ones for writers, but again, you have to kind of think about what your niche is. Twitter seems to be a good place. I know that for a lot of people, they use a lot of Instagram. I don't take great photos, and I have an artistic issue with Instagram because I don't think everybody who posts to Instagram is the Ansel Adams they think they are because they have a filter. So my get off my lawn old lady self is still coming around to Instagram, but I'm getting a good following there. And finding the next new one. I think if you're a young writer, you want to make sure that you're creating a Snapchat channel. There's a lot of ability to market on Snap. So it's really, again, thinking about where does your audience live on the internet. A couple of years ago, the Aminos were hot in comics. And those people were so young, I really felt like I needed a walker. So, if you're a young writer, look to what your friends are doing. Look to what you use and build your community there. Find your community there.
Yeah, that is great advice, and I really appreciate you taking a deep dive with me on that, because you brought up a lot of great points, and I really appreciate you letting our audience know about those different strategies.
Well, thank you.
Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So, what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Oh, dude, that is a tough call. It's kind of like telling me to choose between my two dogs. Like, there's the one that's like really smart and gets herself in a lot of trouble, and then there's the one that's like super chill and just like stares and sits and wants pets. I've always been a big reader, so I think there have been so many books that kind of inform who I am. Part of me, despite it sounds terrible, wants to say The Fountainhead, because I read it as a teen. And I was a big Frank Lloyd Wright fan, still am, have a Frank Lloyd Wright tattoo. So when I read it as a teen, and I made a lot of connections between The Fountainhead and Wright's work, and was big into it, so that was kind of a foundational moment for me. And I still feel that a lot of the discussions in The Fountainhead about respecting your work and making people respect your work and not always giving in to editorial requirements is important, especially for a creative or a writer. I don't think I'm a creative. I'm definitely too logical. And then the other part of me wants to say A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I read that when I was a little kid, probably my own kid's age, 9 or 10. And I reread it every few years. And what I learned from that one is probably more meaningful. It's not even the message in the book so much as it's that every time I read it, my life experiences inform my reading. I read it when I was 9 or 10, and I was Francie. I was the little kid who went to the library, didn't have a lot of friends, and sat and her books were her friends. And when I read it in my early 20s, I started to realize, holy cow, like those parents, he's a drunk. Oh my God. Oh my God, the mom, she had a miscarriage. Wow. When I read it when I was trying to get pregnant and having a hard time, the mom having the miscarriage, I think it was, that really spoke to me. And I think I cried harder at that particular section than ever before. And, reading it as a parent like 2 years ago or last year, it was like, wow, she was such a good mom. She her kids were so well behaved, and, she gave them freedom because she had to, but she was a working mom. And, that it was something that didn't happen at that time. So it was definitely, I think, the first book where I could see a shift in how my reading of the book changed as I had new life experiences. And I think that's an important life lesson as a whole, that we need to revisit things we think we know and reassess how we view them as we age.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
That actually isn't even that hard. People would probably think that it would be a Hamilton quote, but it's not. When I was in high school, we had to read Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead. And one of the final lines, and I have it committed to memory, I think, is, we can move, of course, change direction, rattle about, but our movement is contained within a greater one, which carries us along as inexorably as the wind and current. And I think it really summarizes my approach to life. Whether life is really based on fate or free will, there's a finite amount of choices we have. It's sort of like those old Choose Your Adventure novels where there's a preordained outcome and we make choices within the framework. Every choice I make today impacts the ones I'm going to be able to make tomorrow, which impacts the ones I'm going to make tomorrow. So I really think that whenever I'm looking for something that's kind of inspiring, I always think back to that particular quote to sort of guide how I'm looking at my life at the moment.
Well, Karen, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Well, on LinkedIn, you can connect with me professionally under @geeky, Geeky Karen, because I am a total geek. And if you want your daily or semi-daily dose of random nerd, parent, infosec writing, humor, You can always check me out at K Von Hard, K as in Karen, V as in Victor, O-N as in Nancy, H-A-R-D as in dog at Twitter. That would be my first initial and the first part of my extremely long, very German maiden name, Von Hardenberg.
Well, Karen, I want to thank you again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Well, thank you so much. I had an excellent time speaking with you, Paul.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.